Today, I caught up with the former Vice President Al Gore, the founder and chair of the Climate Reality Project, about just how much is at stake right now. Mr. Vice President, thank you so much for joining us. You famously raised the alarm about climate change with your documentary, An Inconvenient Truth, and you were awarded the Nobel Prize for that effort. Since then, global temperatures have risen on a steep curve. How critical is it for world leaders to deliver results at this COP26 summit before it's too late?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on, Wolf. It's very critical. I think most everybody understands that by this time. We're using the thin shell of atmosphere surrounding our planet as if it's an open sewer, putting all of this heat-trapping pollution there. And we've seen the consequences that the scientists predicted would occur, all these heavy downpours and floods and droughts and hurricanes and sea level rise and all the rest. And so there is a widespread consensus now in the U.S. and throughout the world that these leaders really have to come to agreements that lead to much more substantive action more quickly.
President Biden says the goals of the Paris Climate Accord are still within reach, but a UN report issued just last week estimates that emissions would need to be cut 7 times faster than current commitments to meet that goal. Is that still possible?
Yes, the goal of limiting the temperature increase to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, that's 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit, that goal is still within reach. Countries have to move faster, but let me say this. I think President Biden had an extremely successful visit here, 2 days that, well, really 3, really cram-packed with speeches and meetings and actions that really did make a difference. He gave a terrific speech in the big meeting of leaders. He followed that up today with a terrific initiative on forests and then on methane, which needs more attention. I think he made a huge difference with his time here.
But, Mr. Vice President, how do you reach that goal when leaders of some of the world's biggest polluters, Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, aren't even attending the summit and aren't really stepping up with commitments?
Well, it's regrettable that President Xi Jinping did not come to this event. I will agree with that point of view. But remember this, that this meeting is more than just what takes place in the meeting rooms. In advance of this meeting, in preparation for this meeting, the President of China made a very significant commitment to end all of China's financing of overseas coal plants, and they were building 72% of them. So that's a major commitment. And then in advance of this summit, he also made a commitment almost a year ago to reach net zero, a little bit longer time frame than I would like, but still the direction of travel is clear, and he made a commitment to peak their emissions before the end of this decade. And with a country that big, that's not nothing. So they are moving. They're building more windmills and solar panels than the rest of the world put together. It's a huge country in a growth phase. So they need to do more. Our country needs to do more as well. Every country needs to do more.
The Biden administration, as you know, just announced these comprehensive new rules aimed at cutting methane emissions across the oil and gas industry. How far will this go in addressing the problem?
Well, that's a very significant, very important initiative that President Biden announced. The climate scientists will tell you that methane is almost 60% of the causation factor that is represented by CO2. It has a shorter lifetime in the atmosphere, but it's very important because each molecule of methane is 84 times as powerful as a molecule of CO2, again, over a shorter time frame. But the best way we can get quick results is by cutting methane, and we can do it because it has economic value. They should close up these leaks, stop the flaring of it, and really we ought to stop building any new gas or oil pipelines. That's where a lot of these leaks come from.
President Biden, as you know, he's still pushing to get his own climate legislation passed through Congress, but it no longer includes a key program that would have rewarded utilities from moving to clean energy and penalized those who didn't make the transition. Can President Biden still get the U.S. on track for net zero emissions by 2050 with this scaled back plan?
Yes, I think he can. And not only that, I think he can still have a 50% reduction by 2030, which most people think is the more important goal. It's a way station toward net zero in 2050. When he could not get that clean electricity standard, he regrouped. Gina McCarthy and John Kerry are here. I've talked with them about it. The new provisions, of course, they haven't passed in the Congress yet, but I still have some hope that they will pass. Senator Manchin, who held it up, has said he needs more time to study it. I hope that we'll end up getting most of that package and that the U.S. will be able to continue on the pathway to meeting those commitments.
President Biden actually apologized at this summit for former President Trump's decision to pull out of the Paris Climate Accord. But can world leaders really count on the United States knowing another president could undo President Biden's efforts?
Well, you hear some talk of that sort, for sure, but it's important to realize that a majority of Republicans now, along with an even bigger majority of Democrats, are in favor of taking bold actions to solve the climate crisis. So I'm hopeful that public opinion will make a difference, whichever party is in power. Of course, I'm a Democrat, and I hope Democrats keep the Congress next year. But I'm even more hopeful that this surge of public support for actions to solve the climate crisis will have an impact on both political parties.
Well, we'll see what happens because the stakes clearly, Mr. Vice President, are critical. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for all your important work.
Thank you, Wolf.